Hello and welcome to the Change Gang podcast with me, your host, Laura Ordile. I'm here to help you hold on to your sanity and your soul as you move through big change. I'm here to guide you from frustration to flow in your life, bridging the practical and the woo, just for you. Let's go. All right. Welcome to the week, Change Gang. I have an amazing, fun conversation ahead with Mielle Fox. And I met her on her podcast, Energy of the Untamed Heart. So I'm so happy that you're here with me today, Mielle. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. So I'm going to just dive in real quick because I love, first of all, the name of your podcast, Energy of the Untamed Heart. What made you decide on that? What's the energy of the untamed heart?
So lots of things sort of pushed me towards coming up with that name. So part of it is I have a personal belief that all of us have a wild, untamable, undomesticatable part of our soul and our being, our essence in our heart space. And we spend an awful lot of our time covering it all up with conditioning and thoughts and belief patterns. So the untamed portion is how do we walk ourselves home to our heart? How do we get back to that just free, wild, expansive space that all of us hold within ourselves? And the other reason I called it Energy of the Untamed Heart is because I'm very interested in the science and spiritual connection that we all hold as 3D beings in a multi-D existence. So that's where the energy piece came through. And then the third piece, of course, is that I am very engaged in numerology and the energy of evolving and pivoting towards a space of freedom, which is what happens when you return home to your heart in that whole process of the journey. All seem to fit together. So Energy of the Untamed Heart.
Wonderful. But I want to talk about the energy for a second. Tell me what you do. You're an energy navigator is one of the ways that you describe yourself. And so what do you do for people to help them?
So it's so interesting. When people ask me this, I had to really sit and think about what an answer would be, because the first few times people would say, so what do you do? I'd be like, I don't know. I just do me, I guess. I don't know. It's just the way I am. So then I had a chat with a mentor of mine, and she said, no, not everybody can hone in the way you hone in. You have a skill set of taking all the bits and pieces and you assemble them very quickly to assess how can you bring forward information for people, or how can you help people see the opportunities, the possibilities in what's going on. And so I do that a couple of different ways. Obviously, through numerology, it allows me to sort of translate your birth-coded information and give you a better sense of these are the things that are consistent through your personality, but these are the ways that you could shift or move or change your direction of your journey, depending on what your desires are, of course, and free will and choice, but there's that piece of it. But the other piece is, by virtue of just the way I'm put together, I'm very analytical. I take bits and pieces of information very quickly and assemble and offer solutions, not necessarily the answers, but potential solutions or potential ideas that just might spark something in a client to help them move through or navigate a challenge. It's almost like I have a capacity to see people's blind spots that maybe they in the moment don't see for themselves. And because I'm not in their space directly, I'm not them, it's a lot easier for me to see that. And so I didn't really have a great way to phrase what are all the things I do. So I thought Energetics Navigator seemed to make sense to me. It's sort of an all-encompassing term that kind of covers a little this and a little that. I'm also an aligned wellness coach, so I help people walk their way home to finding that harmony and alignment from head, heart, and body through all the different things. So I'm sort of, I do a little this and a little that. Jack of all trades, I guess. Yeah.
That's great. I love that because I do a lot of different things too. Somebody told me that you wear so many hats, and it's like, it's more like I kind of piece my outfit all together and wear it at the same time.
Yes. Yes. So, and I think that's really great because nobody wants to be put in the box. Nobody wants to be given the cookie cutter solution to whatever their personal needs are. They come to you as an individual. They come to you with a very specific concern or desire, vision, want, problem, whatever the thing may be. And nobody wants to be just, put in a box where, oh, you checked 1, 2, 3, so therefore here's your answer. So to have lots of different modalities with which you can approach somebody's desires or needs really, I think, is the key, because now you're customizing how can I best help you as an individual, as opposed to, oh, you answered my questionnaire like this, therefore you go in this particular category or that particular category. I'm really not thrilled with being dropped into a category. Do you know what I mean? I feel that we're gifted and given so many gifts with which we can show up. So why just use one?
Gosh, I have 2 different directions I want to go, but one thing I'm going to make a note real quick because I want to come back to that. But one thing I want to say there is that when you talk about seeing someone's blind spot or seeing something, that's such an amazing thing to do, because it brings you into that observer mode, where if we could all get to that observer mode for ourselves, we would see such amazing things about ourselves, about the world. It would change our perspective. We would come into such an awareness. But we muddle into it because of our own feelings and our own little tiny view. It's like being in a snow globe where you don't see outside of the snow globe. All you see is what's raining down around you. And when someone else goes, let it settle for a minute. Let's see what's going on. And they can see the wider picture. It really does help someone. And I think that's why it's what we do and what so many other people do out in the world. Maybe was almost laughed at for a while, the rage of life coaches and all of those things. But then I think it's come into such a different way of looking at it, seeing it now, that it's so nice to have someone else that can take an objective viewpoint, can be the observer in our life and say, here's maybe what you're not seeing. And then you step into that awareness for yourself, and it's like, oh, okay. How do we get myself beyond that? Help me to move beyond it, and then you can help them. But until they come into that awareness, you just can't see.
Yeah. So again, I actually think, and I'd have to go back and look because I don't stare at it daily, but I actually think my descriptor on the podcast site itself is awareness navigator, awareness navigation, or something to say, but the word awareness is in there, and I think you're 150% spot on. And part of the reason it's really nice to have a quote unquote outsider observer available to sort of act as a conduit or a guide or a mentor, translator, whatever phrase you want to put to it, is because our own experiences automatically apply our own 3D filter. It's just the nature of being human. It's what we are. It's who we are. It's how we're made. So all of what I refer to as the blocks that we put in front of our heart, or unable to hear the whispers of our heart, the blind spots to your personal development and growth, all of those things I think come from needing to understand and learn how to be our own observer, which takes some time, definitely takes some time, and it takes grace to not expect you're going to have everything overnight. But it also means that you're able to start to see that the way things have always been has been because of the filter that we apply to what we perceive. Basically, what you see in front of you is your projection of everything that you've either had a memory of, an experience of. It's coming from your gigantic database in your being. I mean, that's really where it comes from. And if you want that to be different, it takes a moment by moment awareness of who's running the show. Is it my part of my mind, which has always been trying to help me and run the show? Or is it something else? Is it the whispers of my heart and my higher self showing me the way I need to move next? And when we can step out of being in character and learn to be the observer, then we're in a position to make that next choice with a greater level of awareness. So I think, again, being on the outside of it, where the client's very wrapped up in the filter that's kind of overlaying or shifting what is really being seen through a filter. That's exactly what a filter does. Yes. I mean, look at the filter on the screen here where I'm blurry and you're clear. Yeah. It's the same thing with our lives. We perceive things based on how we project, and how we project is based on our personal filter. So to have somebody else who can help see the things you're not able to see yourself until you are able to see them yourself, it's really helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that once you bring that into focus, like the screen that you're talking about, when you bring that into focus for yourself, it brings you into a place inside where all of a sudden you feel okay. You're just able to function in a way that is so different. The things around you don't affect you in the same way. You don't have the, oh my gosh, you don't fall into the fear trap that takes you to being a bag lady or to being whatever it is, to losing everything, to being all that, because our imagination is this crazy, amazing thing. And it brings you instead into a place of, oh, okay, that happened. I don't like it. Maybe I am a little uncomfortable in the moment, but I'm okay. And I'm going to find my way through that. Whole different energy in how you face the things.
It's a very different energy because it's what I refer to as a reflective, pausing kind of an energy as opposed to a reactive energy, which also comes from a place, if a reactive energy is that spontaneous or instantaneous, this happens, this is how I respond. It's very much, of course, how our survival nervous system responds. I have something that's threatening me. I need to respond in a certain way so I can survive. So that whole history of how does our nervous system work is just innate to us. It is what it is, but it doesn't equal we cannot regulate it or modify it in some way. And when we can get to that place, which comes through the awareness of, oh my gosh, I actually have a choice here. Oh my gosh, I'm not going to get eaten by the saber-toothed tiger. Oh my gosh, this isn't life or death in this very moment. And you slow things down to just sort of have the understanding, the awareness, again, there's the word, that there could be another way. There could be a different choice. There could be another path. When you're able to just own that piece of, possibility, there could be, that in itself helps to regulate that busy side of our nervous system, put us into our more harmonic, healing, responsive to our basic needs nervous system. When you're in that space, you can make a decision and a choice much more readily. It's very, you can think of almost any everyday life example of, okay, I'm going across the street and I see a car, coming 50 miles an hour. You're not going to pause and think about that. Your survival mode's kicking in and you're saying, let me get my hiney over to the curb real fast here. So that's an example of fight, flight, gotta go, right? Like you don't think twice. It's, I have something and there I go. Here's my instantaneous response. As opposed to I'm on one side of the curb, I take a minute, I look around, I assess, is there an ambulance screaming down the highway or not? Or is this a good time for me to gently step off the curb and take a stroll across the street? You've slowed yourself down to take an assessment of your environment, to have an awareness of your environment, pause, integrate it, make a choice.
Right.
It's the same thing with everything we do every day. We stop. Right. We have the awareness of the environment, the situation. We pause for a little bit to integrate. What does that mean for me? How does that work for me? How does that feel for me? All those things. And then we make a choice based on that information. So without knowing it, we really are already experiencing and practicing that observer role. We do it easily with everything else in our world. And it's just a little bit of a learning curve of turning it inward. So you do it for your inward best interest as well. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think we get in the habit sometimes, unfortunately, of being in fight, flight, freeze in those modes. And because that's where we're trapped in that feeling, in that thing, or maybe it's because that's where we've always learned to be. From the time we were tiny, that's the reaction. And so you're living in that at any given time. And we're not meant to live in it. We're meant to experience it. Absolutely. Just like you said, to keep us safe, to be in that space. But when your mind triggers and puts it into a loop of, oh, we're going this way, we're doing this, this is what we're doing because we need to keep you safe. There needs to be that interruption. There needs to be that reset in order to be like, okay, let's interrupt that flow. Let's shut that down. Let's take a breath. It's that filter that you talk about, because when you're in that space, and you're seeing everything as that emergency, as I have to hurry up and get across the road. I have to hurry up and do this. I have to do this. I have to respond to that. In whatever one you do, or you're not responding at all. Maybe you're the freeze person. And interestingly, I didn't realize this, but oftentimes, even though we experience all of those, there's one of them that comes into play when we're a child at some point, and that's often the one that shows up for us all the time. So it might be that you're the person that runs away from everything. Or it might be that you're the person that refuses to engage, that freezes, that if I just stay still, it's going to go away. It's all going to change. It's going to be okay if I do nothing.
Yes. So it's really interesting. So since we're talking so many analogies, I have two that just floated through my head. And I think this brings the point to light just as equally well as all the other ways we're talking about it. So imagine you're a deer and there you are in a field. So if you watch how a deer behaves, they're very much a fight or flight survival creature. They're a prey animal and they live by surviving. I mean, that's how it works. And so in order to do that, they have to have a tremendously heightened awareness of what is around them. So they're very energetically tuned in, if you want to think of it that way. But if you watch a deer, they don't just randomly run. And, you're coming up the road in your vehicle or you're walking your dog or whatever the thing may be. You will see them stop, pause, stare at you, stand still, and sometimes they stand still, like that's how we get the phrase deer in the headlights. They literally freeze because they're not clear about which way to go. But other times they stand still, take a look, assess whether they can continue to graze in the field or do they need to turn around and hightail it out of there, and then they make a choice. So that comes so naturally in our animal world. It's when we get to our human world that we start to complicate things with emotional history, generational history, stored cellular emotions. Many of our prey animals don't have that, of course. That's the difference between humans and non-humans, is that next level capacity to hold on to stored information and then make lateral decisions based on that stored information. Your average deer out in the field isn't really doing that. So that's one example of slow down, pause prior to making the choice. And the other thing I was thinking is, we talk about the overwhelm of I got to do it all, I got to be it all, I got to hurry, I gotta, and how that really leaves us in a constantly overstimulated piece of our nervous system, which what happens when you go that way long-term chronically, you end up with adrenal fatigue. Why? Because your body's just shooting out cortisol all the time, and it's not our desired or designed way to exist, but we do. And I was thinking about the hamster on the wheel. So, if you got a hamster who's really rocking it out and going to town on the wheel, that little thing is not going to suddenly just decide to get off the wheel because he'll be spun into space, at 20 hamster feet per hour. I don't know what it is. But, they start to slow down before they get off the wheel. Otherwise, they're like a chuck-it toy, right? They'll be like, woo, there you go, right off the wheel. So it's the same thing with us. We don't just boom, jump off the wheel. People are like, I want out of my loop. I want off my hamster wheel. Okay. But you're not going to just leap off at 60 miles an hour. You're going to slow down until you feel safe to step off the ride. Step off the ride. You don't catapult off the merry-go-round. You step off the turntable, so to speak, right? I have this visual of this poor little hamster flinging around the room. So funny.
I have to tell you, I think it was on TikTok or something where there is an account actually, and I've come across it a couple times. And I thought, what the heck but they were just showing live all of these little hamsters on these little spinny things, little wheels, just going at it.
Right?
And the hamster. And actually some of them would take a misstep and go flying off. And I was just like, but.
Right. And never a good ending like that. It's never a good ending if you do something like that. It's always in your best interest to slow it down. And, look both ways before you fling yourself off the hamster wheel. Yeah.
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 And use your energy in the way that you want to be using it so that you don't, get flung up across the head or anything like that. And you know what? It's going to happen. There's going to be things in life where it just happens. And then unfortunately, sometimes you're afraid to get back up, afraid to start again, afraid to move in a new direction because you're afraid of that injury or being in that same space. That's where the work that you do specifically can come into play too. And it's like, well, let me tell you a little bit about what happened here. And it doesn't have to happen again because here's how you're going to do it differently. And you start with that reset. You start changing the way that you think, the way your unconscious goes. You move forward in a way that is wholly different than how you did it before.
It's wholly different. And I think as our society, especially today's society, we're very instantaneous. Like we're very, we want it right away and we want it quick, ready, and disposable. Whether that is the beverages we buy at a store, the food we prepare for our families, our mental well-being, our physical well-being. How many people do you see? Perfect time of year. Here we are at the end of the year. How many people do you know are going to rush out starting January 1st, slap their money on the table to go to the gym or sign up for the diet plan or whatever the thing is? And there's a huge statistic that shows the majority of those folks will do it for several weeks and then poof, end of story, and they'll go back to their old ways. And why? Because it's not an instant fix. None of this is an instant fix. You did not get to where you perceive yourself as your personal growth chaos at whatever age you're at overnight. And it's not going to unwind itself overnight, but it has to start somewhere. And it has to be practiced. It's just like any other skill, whether you play the guitar, you're a jogger, you play tennis. You don't get to be the tennis pro overnight. You have to spend time practicing the skill. So teaching yourself to become an observer, teaching yourself to focus and harness awareness, teaching yourself to give yourself grace, to be kind to yourself and understanding and compassionate of yourself, to provide the window that you need to slow your mind down and hear your heart whispering to you takes practice. It's not quick.
No, I think the change can come quick. However, because of what I do, I know that the reset button, that path going into the subconscious changes everything forward. However, a lot of the things that I do and the follow-up and the work that I do, especially when I'm working one-on-one with someone, is that once you go in and you hit that reset button and you change, I'm going to say, the programming in your mind, you change the code that's there so that you're not having the conflict of the person that goes to do the gym work and they're really trying to make the change, but it's not sticking. And the reason it's not sticking is because there's a subconscious conflict in there. When you go in and you remove those subconscious conflicts, blocks, whatever you want to call them, and you hit that reset and you give your mind a new direction, new directions on how you want to live your life, then you're able to step in and do those new practices and work out that new muscle in a continuous way that actually brings strength to it, in a way that allows you to not be fighting against it constantly. And you do see the changes that happen. That's one of the things. I love what I do. I absolutely love what I do. And it changes everything for people. You still have to learn to live in a new way after all of those changes come. You still have to go, I haven't lived a sober life before. How do you do this? Maybe you don't go hang out at the bar. So where do I go hang out? You start to find the new paths, the new ways of living. And I think that is so incredible.
It is incredible. And I think what you're describing is 100% on board. Is in order to shift or break a pattern, you have to recreate a new pattern that will replace it. The way our mind works is it learns a series of connected neuron responses, and that creates what we call a pattern. So it happens over and over and over. And so when A happens, B happens, C happens, there you go. Now you get D. So this slowing down and creating the space to make other choices and to work through those subconscious old patterns opens the doorway to create the new pattern. So it isn't the same ABCD. Now you're creating a different order of those neurons connecting. So therefore you will develop a new pattern, but it will take time and practice. And I think probably the biggest thing, why do people struggle? So the two main reasons my perception is why people struggle so much when they start something and then they're disappointed because it doesn't happen right away. There's actually three reasons. One is I really believe that we can't just address one component of our overall well-being and expect everything else to fall into place. So it's really great you want to go to the gym and work out. That's nice. But in the meantime, if you haven't addressed things like I'm an emotional compulsive eater and I live on Snickers and beer, and that's my go-to, but yet I still go to the treadmill and run 15 miles. That's nice. So that's a discord right there. When you don't address, what has been going on for me for decades, either emotionally, psychologically, physically, thought processes, whatever, you're only going to get to a certain level of achievement in whatever modality you choose, because the truth is it's all connected. And so there needs to be, not necessarily you're going to fix all these different components in a day, because you're not, but you got to start somewhere. And you've got to start with understanding that everything it's a weaving of these different energetic levels, your physical, your emotional, your mental, your spiritual. It's a weaving of all of these things is what creates us as a soul in a 3D essence. To go to whatever direction one chooses to go is a starting point. And to have someone help guide you is certainly very, very, very helpful for sure. So that's definitely part one of what do I think goes on. I think many humans, and myself included, I mean, I'm certainly not off the plate here. We try to fix things like one zone at a time and then wonder why we're still struggling. Why are we still having whatever the thing is, thoughts, moments, difficulties, feeling like we're trapped or overwhelmed, because it's not as simple as a monthly membership to the gym. Although it's a good start. It's a good start.
Don't go cancel your membership if you started one.
Right.
Just get the backup.
Right?
To make sure that you can complete the goal that you want. So sometimes it's important to have that backup, I think. Then we kind of started in that conversation a little while ago with having someone there with you to see those things. And I think oftentimes having that person next to you for however long they are makes such a valuable difference in you getting where you are. It might not be the whole way. It might be a few steps. It might be for a few months, a year, whatever it is for you that you feel like you really need the support in. Oftentimes people won't step out and say, I need support. I need someone to help me with this in some way. But I think if you're listening and you hear that and you know that, and maybe you're connecting with you or me or somebody like that, and you're hearing, they could really help me, or gosh, I could probably use a little help. That's your intuition. That's your body. That's your brain. That's every part of you saying, we can do this, but we need a little help. And you know what? Asking for help is, I think, one of the most courageous things you can ever do in life. It's not weak. It's so strong to say, give me a hand. Give me a hand for a little bit. Help me up. Help me walk this way.
There's a reason they call it teamwork is dream work, right? I mean, you don't hear be an island, it's so great. Yeah, there's a reason for that. And what I will say is I think it is very, very courageous and vulnerable for many of us, and I, again, myself included, to learn to ask for help when I need it. I absolutely had a window of time where I was like, yeah, I can do this. I don't need anybody kind of thing. And I had a belief system that to ask for help was a sign of weakness. To ask for help meant you weren't smart enough, good enough, know enough, weakness because you can't figure it out yourself. Like all those thoughts, and all of which are untrue, by the way. But, there was a window of time where that's what I believed. And part of that was created because I had a violation of trust and basically, or in a fear of judgment. And so there's a whole cascade of things that go along with the simple phrase of just ask for help. It sounds like duh, like, oh, just ask for help, duh. But for the individual, and I say this with absolute, I've walked the walk. I've been in that place. Sometimes what sounds like the easiest step in the whole wide world can be the biggest mountain ever, like the hardest. You literally feel like, oh my gosh, if I take that step, I'm falling off the edge and into the chasm. OMG.
Yeah.
And so I'm just here to say the flip side to the fear of am I falling in the chasm if I were to ask for help is to say, can you hold faith that asking for help is like opening a new door to possibility for you? It's the door that you're struggling to open for yourself. And so people like yourself, myself, and many, many other mentors are here to help hold the door open for you so you can walk through it with a little less struggle. At the end of the road, it's still you, the individual, doing all the work. We're not fixing. We're helping to facilitate, but we're not fixing. The only one that does the work is ourselves, right? I mean, that's just the reality of it. Here's the other thing I think about, and for myself, where I had a window of time where I was very reluctant to ask for help. Part of it was because, again, the trust and judgment and all the things. But the other piece was, isn't that pretty interesting that you think you have all the answers so much so that you couldn't possibly learn another answer from another individual? That's a pretty mighty, that's a pretty mighty thing to carry around.
Right?
Is it possible that my little human brain knows every single possibility to solve this problem, as opposed to, I may not know everything. I'm wondering if I were to ask for help, perhaps there's a brainstorming event or a heart-storming event here that could bring something to the forefront. It's a very different, how are you approaching the table?
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I always want to work with the people that are willing and that want the change and that say, yes, I'm ready. I know it might be jumping off a cliff. I know it might be scary. I know it might be there. And I had a mentor. She's so funny because she says, we're just tour guide Barbie. We're just leading the way. And
basically,
yeah. We're just a tour guide.
Yeah.
We're show you the
pretty
options.
Much.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's so insightful and I love that. And I appreciate that. I'm obviously going to have your information in the show notes, but will you please go ahead and tell people where they can connect with you, Mielle?
Of course, absolutely. So I'm a little bit everywhere, and I have to say I'm not the most consistent just because my schedule's just so crazy. But you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Mielle Fox. I'm sure you'll have it all typed out in the show notes. The spelling is Miellefox, like the little fuzzy animal with a bushy tail. I also have a Facebook group on Facebook with the same name as my website, which is Fox Den Energetics. And I have my podcast, Energy of the Untamed Heart, currently up on most listening platforms. Not all, but most. And, of course, anybody can just find me, DM me. I'm available. I'm out there. You can find me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Thanks
Absolutely.
for being here, Mielle.
My pleasure. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And I know it's
good.
going to be meaningful for someone out there, and that's why, of course, we do what we do. All right, Change Gang. Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. I hope that you head off into the week and have a wonderful one. And I also hope that you meet me right here, same time next week. I hope today's episode was interesting to you in some way and fun. If so, hey, find someone to share it with. Maybe they need to hear it too, or maybe they'll just enjoy it. If you'd like, go ahead and grab my tips on supercharging your success. It includes a free short meditation to do just that. You can find that at bit.ly/supercharge your success. Until next time, happy day.